Jayvon Parker can make a major impact against Weber State.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back in to another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He's site editor with Athlon Sports' Inside the Huskies. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKDOWNCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Lars, we've got so much fun stuff that we're going to get to today. We're going to talk about Jedd Fisch's not so subtle recruiting pitch that he made to a bunch of wide receivers at the end of his Monday press conference. We're going to talk about the 6 captains that the Huskies named late on Monday night. And we're also going to talk about some X factors against Weber State. And the number one X factor that both you and I had when we came to the table with this was defensive tackle Jayvon Parker.
Exactly. And it's the one guy that when we were going through fall camp and writing these depth charts down and saying, hey, these are the lines, it's like, but it's really not, because when you add Jayvon Parker back to this mix, and when we saw him working out, we knew it wasn't a long-term thing. There wasn't any clear indicator that he was going to miss a significant amount of in-season time, and it ended up that he didn't miss any. The question will be, how much does he end up playing? But regardless, Jayvon Parker is a guy that we've seen over the last couple of seasons as a backup. Man, when he can kind of just get into a full season, a full starting role, and especially I think this defense is perfect for him. So it's almost like the perfect marriage of Jayvon's going to be healthy. He's finally getting a shot next to a guy like Sebastian Valdez, who to me, like, they're perfect to play off of each other. His skill set and size, 6'3", 297, who can actually get some pass rush, does pretty well against the run as well. It's Washington, like when we looked at what they had in fall camp, I mean, Sebastian's in his own league in that respect, but they don't have another guy kind of like Jayvon. And so that's why marrying the two together along that defensive front just changes the game so much for this defense.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that, I was talking to this morning before we recorded this on Tuesday. I was talking to a future guest on the show. I won't spoil that. We won't give that away. That's going to be a really, really fun episode whenever that person ends up on the podcast. But I was talking to them a little bit about the roster. We were doing a breakdown together. And one person that he asked me about was Jayvon Parker. And I said, this is a guy who's really, really exciting. He's somebody who I feel can take a major step forward this season in Steve Belichick's defense for a lot of the same reasons that we expect Sebastian Valdez to do that, where he's somebody who is athletic enough to line up all over the formation. We saw that in the spring when he was fully healthy, that he was doing a whole bunch of different things from a whole bunch of different spots. And Lars, I was thinking about this, the other day when we heard that he was going to be healthy and that he's probably going to end up getting some time. I'm thinking about a pass rush package of defensive tackles where it's Sebastian Valdez, Voit Tanufi, and Jayvon Parker, where I feel like that's exactly what Steve Belichick wants to see. And then, you can throw Lance Holtzclaw on the outside, Zach Durfee on the other side. And I feel those are things we've seen with those 3 down linemen, and you still have 2 edge rushers in the formation. So there are a lot of ways that you can make this work. And that's one of the things I want to see against Weber State, where it's, if Jayvon is healthy, which Jedd Fisch said, he wants him to play a lot, but wants to make sure he's okay in pregame warmups first. If Jayvon is able to go and be a full go, it seems like he's going to have a substantial snap count. And I want to see what kind of impact he can make in this defense. And I want to switch sides here real fast, because another guy that I really want to see what he's going to look like is left tackle Soane Faasolo, where when you talk about X factors, I feel like he might be the biggest X factor for how this entire season is going to play out, where the more you look at him, you say, okay, this is a guy who clearly still has some ways to go. He's a redshirt freshman. Not every redshirt freshman, can step in and start right away. And Brennan Carroll has had a long history of developing those guys and making sure that they're serviceable and ready to play. So I want to see what kind of leap he's able to take under him, where Brennan was very complimentary of him, said they put a lot of good weight on him and they're happy with how he's progressed. And one of the things that I really want to see is this Weber State defensive line is sneaky good it's very experienced when you look at it from top to bottom. And when I look at Soane, that's the one guy where, you know, you look at the rest of the line, you see Drew Party has his experience at San Diego State. Brennan Carroll is really complimentary of Enoch Vimahai, who's got a lot of experience under his belt at Ohio State. D'Angelo Tuti-Lee, who we talked about yesterday and all his experience at center. Guard has a few games under his belt at left guard, but he's somebody who we know how long he's been in the room and what he would have looked like last year if he was fully healthy. So we expect him to, you know, not miss a beat, and we'll see how that looks, which puts a lot. I don't mean to put a lot of pressure on him in this case, but it does. It puts a lot of pressure on Soane Faasolo to be that fifth and final piece. And, you know, not only can he be the guy that holds this group together, but he's also the blindside protector. He's going to see a lot of tough matchups this season, and he needs to make sure that he can step up.
Exactly. And it's in a way, the pressure is all on Soane. Like, it's good pressure, though. And I think it speaks to the confidence in the coaching staff that they believe that he can handle that pressure. The other side of that coin, you know, as you mentioned, Weber State has a pretty good defensive line, but it's also in respect, no disrespect intended. You don't take these games lightly, but it is also Weber State. You're not talking about Ohio State. You're not talking about facing Michigan. So if he can start to handle some of these tests, and then, you know, week 2 against Eastern Michigan and week 3 against Washington State, then I think that'll just build his confidence. And at the same point, similar to the quarterback situation where DeMond was nipping at Willis Heels, you do have an experienced, albeit, you know, smaller scale at a JUCO level, but Maxim Scree is also still right there. And so if the coaching staff feels that Soane is not able to live up to or not able to handle that pressure, there's a guy right there. But I think it more or less speaks to the confidence that the staff has. And I was glad that I forgot who asked the question, but somebody asked him how asked Brennan Carroll at Tuesday's press conference, what's Soane at weight rise? And he said around 320. And I remember we had this discussion about a month or so ago. It's like, somebody said that. Somebody mentioned that Soane is like around 320, but he's listed on the roster, official roster, like 293, somewhere in that ballpark. That's a significant difference. And if you talk about if Soane was at 293 to start camp and he's at about 320 now, I think that also kind of tells you why the coaching staff is like, yeah, you know what? He took this seriously. He leveled up. Now we're going to give him the shot. He's got to prove us wrong, or in a way, prove us right. We're giving him the benefit of the doubt because he's shown us everything between spring and fall camp. And I think also again, this is one of those guys where he had the spring. Max didn't. There's a lot of these guys that we're looking at in the depth chart where it's why is Jaden Wayne not there and why is Jacob Lane in? Well, again, spring. You have to get that spring 15 period, even though a lot of the roster got added over the summer, matters.
Yes. Lars, is there anybody else you want to make sure that we hit on in terms of X factors in this game?
So I got 2 more, and one that was mentioned today at Tuesday's press conference was Audric Harris, another wide receiver in that room where, man, I remember, I think I posted the clip on Twitter where it was, again, a route on air, just going through simple warm-ups, but Jedd Fisch noticed it right away. It's like, great route, Audie. And I think that speaks to, you know, Audric Harris, another guy who came in the spring, was at Arizona, was the guy that the staff coveted. And I think Kevin Cummings, especially the guys that he is very experienced with and knows and can trust, and Audric gave him no reason not to play him this season. There was a couple of practices, especially later on in camp, where I know we talked about it on the show, where aside from that one touchdown dropped, he had a perfect practice. And I think that's the bar that he set for himself as a freshman. That's the guy you're going to have to look at. Because, again, we know the 3 horsemen. We know the starters. But there's going to have to be some rotation where Will needs to find that 4th and 5th option. Or maybe you want to stretch the defense with 5 wide. Audric's your guy for so many different reasons.
Right. And I know the other guy that you want to talk about in that light is Cameron Broussard, where, real quick, one of the things that I'm really interested in with Cam Broussard, it's what's that timeshare going to look like on the back end of the defense? How is Steve Belichick going to deploy these safeties? We've seen multiple personnel groupings where they have 3 safeties on the field, where it's, you know, it's Justin Harrington, it's Cam Broussard, it's Kamren Fabiculanan, or really any combination of all the guys that they've utilized in the back end. And when I look at Cam Broussard, he's a guy we've seen him line up at inside linebacker. We've seen him line up truly all over the formation. So my question is, what is that timeshare going to look like? Where the more you and I have talked about him throughout the spring, throughout the summer, that he looks like a guy who can make a major impact. And we've seen what he can do in practice, but I'm really curious to see how that role is going to change in a game, because he really looks like a guy who, if he takes the step that this coaching staff believes that he looks like he could turn into one of the best safeties in the conference, which is a really exciting ceiling. And that's all going to start against Weber State, just saying, making sure that he can get a substantial snap count in any way, shape, or form. Lars, we also need to get to the 6 captains that Washington named. Right after a message from our good friends over at Game Time, because Game Time Picks is an awesome new feature that makes getting tickets to your favorite events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. I love the Game Time app. I've used it to attend baseball games all over the country this season, and it's absolutely fantastic. I can't wait to use it a few more times just to make sure I can catch a few more games before the season ends. And Game Time Pick makes it so much easier to save on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. They got all-in pricing where you toggle this feature and it shows your total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. And they got seat views where you can get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, which is one of my favorite features personally. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKDOWNCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. And we've also got a message from our good friends over at FanDuel. You've heard us talk about FanDuel a lot. It's America's #1 sports book. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sports book. And, you know, we're getting into the NFL season. Fun little NFL prop bet that I've been cooking up and thinking about that you need to go check out the odds over on FanDuel because they're pretty nice, is Rome Odunze and Caleb Williams, the Chicago Bears, to win the NFC North. I love the odds they're getting right now. That's a really tough division. But, you know, a few things seem to be breaking their direction already with a few injuries elsewhere. You need to go check out those odds over on FanDuel. So, Lars, Washington named 6 captains on Monday night. It's a really interesting group. You got Will Rogers, who is the only non-member of the 2023 roster who was named a captain. You got Grady Gross in there. You got Alphonzo Tuputala. You got Carson Bruener. You've got Kamren Fabiculanan. And I'm missing one in there. Who's that 6th guy?
That's a great question. Now
it's Cameron Davis.
You mentioned Grady.
It's Cameron Davis.
Okay, Cameron Davis. Actually, no. It is Cameron Davis because that was so. And I'm glad we kind of struggled with that because that was the one to me. Will Rogers, even though he's a new guy, not surprising because again, when you have the starting quarterback who's not a captain, that's kind of a weird situation, especially in a passing offense. That would kind of seem like a weird indicator to me. The one that really speaks to a lot is, I think you and I both agree on this. Jonah Coleman is like the heartbeat of this offense. It feels really almost kind of. In a way, the team, and that's no disrespect to Will, that's no disrespect to anybody else on the team. There's just a different kind of aura that Jonah has. But I think the fact that it's almost kind of what Scotty Graham said a couple of weeks ago when we talked to him, where we came into Cameron Davis's running back room. Myself, Scotty Graham included, came into that room. And so I think it's an homage, kind of a tip of the cap to say, you know what? Also, Cameron Davis is a great teammate. Like, there's never been a guy, I think, so it's not anything like that, but I think it almost kind of speaks to the respect that some of these guys who hung around for their 3rd or even 4th coach have, where you're talking about this is a brand new team. We're talking 30, 40 guys from last year's team on a team of 85 plus. All these guys are voting for new guys and they're saying, you know what, this is your guys' team. And also, I think one thing that you'll want to talk about is probably the fact that you have both inside linebackers as captains. I think that's an intriguing mix as well.
So that actually is the third thing I wanted to get to, or the first thing I wanted to say is shout out to Cameron Davis. After we talked to him a couple weeks ago, that day that you're referencing, Lars, he hadn't seen the video of Ryan Grubb rapping, at the Seattle Seahawks talent show just yet. And we got a chance to show him that. And he loved every second of it. So shout out to him for that. Now, I really like where you're going there. The first thing that honestly really stuck out to me about this, and then I'll get to the linebackers, is one of the things that Jedd Fisch talked about when he first got here was the fact that he leaned on a lot of these older players to teach him things about Washington and to teach him, certain traditions and the way things go in a lot of different ways where, yeah, he's installing his culture in the way that he wants to do things, but there's certain ways that Washington does things. And he's talked about a lot of these guys that he named captain, whether it be Carson Bruener or Kamren Fabiculanan or Cameron Davis, as you mentioned that Scotty Graham discussed, where with all of those guys, they were the people that this coaching staff went to because they've been around for so long, and they certainly have earned this. And I really like that, the coaching staff, how it was voted on with the players as well, that these were the guys that were recognized because a lot of them have been through a lot and have seen Washington through a very interesting period in school history. So I like that this is the group that they went with where, I remember a couple of years ago where it was voted on in the Kalen DeBoer era as well, but there was a point where a lot of those guys were transfers in their first year that were elected as captains. And I'm not saying that one way is better than the other, because obviously, the players have as much of a say in this as the coaching staff does. But I just thought it was really interesting that of, the 6 guys that ended up getting voted on, only one of them is, one of those true transfers, where everybody else on this roster has been here 4, 5, 6 seasons, which obviously means a lot. And obviously that's a really important part of all of this outside of Grady. I know, he's a freshman in 22, but that's something that certainly seems to mean a lot to Jedd Fisch, to this coaching staff, to all these guys, as the more we dive into what this Jedd Fisch era is going to be, he's living up to those promises of, yeah, these are the guys I want to lean on. I want to make sure that, the players have a say in this and that, and all those extra things. And on top of that, yes, the linebacker piece of this is very, very interesting where, those 2 guys are probably going to be on the field a lot together in Carson Bruener and Alphonzo Tuputala. They're going to be getting the guys lined up. Those are going to be the 2 guys that probably primarily wear the green dot. I know only one can wear it at a time. So it feels like most of those responsibilities are going to fall to Carson Bruener. But I feel like that's very telling that those guys, with all their experience, with how long they've been here, have really emerged as leaders. And especially for, Carson, who his dad was also a captain. It's just, it's a really awesome mark for both those guys to have in their final season.
Exactly. It's you reap what you sow. And I think that's kind of what this is. And in a way also, I'll continue kind of wrap up on the linebackers, and I want to make one more point that we haven't necessarily touched on that I do think also kind of ties into the first segment. But a guy like Carson, where I remember talking to him at the Sports Star banquet in February, and just a guy, I remember when he committed to Washington, he was traveling with his Woodinville High School basketball team to some basketball camp, instead of going to the Rising Stars camp. He's a true teammate in the definition of a teammate. Wherever your feet are at presently, whatever team you're currently on, be there for that team, be a leader for that team. And it was basketball, so it doesn't mean that much in the grand scheme of things, but it spoke to kind of who Carson is. And so when you look back, and obviously Zoe kind of in the different light, for being what he's been able to be, coming all the way from Federal Way, and the kind of the career that he's had, it's almost like you don't want to pick one or the other. So I think it was kind of a perfect fit to make both those guys captains. And also, almost in a way, to your point, you could actually take 1 or 2 off, or you're not even sure who's actually setting the signals. There might be some gamesmanship within the gamesmanship in that, where Zoe's sending out some stuff and Carson's sending out some stuff. If teams are trying to pick up on what Washington's signals are, you don't necessarily know who's got the helmet and who doesn't. So I think, I'm not saying that's totally intentional, but I can kind of see that being a case. But the one guy that I think I wanted to kind of wrap this up on is Grady Gross. When we talk about X factors, we can't necessarily talk about Grady Gross as an X factor, because his position is so important in terms of, if you don't have a kicker, you're kind of out of luck. But it's also cool for Grady, because when you look back at Arizona, Jedd had one of the best kickers in the conference, not named Grady Gross. And so going into that with Jordan Paopao, and Paopao is well aware of the Arizona area, so I'm sure he at least knew of Grady when he was coming up to Washington. And I think it kind of just speaks to, because we were talking about this before the show, I can't think of the last time Washington had a special teams guy, a true specialist, either a punter, or kicker, or long snapper, as a captain. And I think that speaks to just how the team views Grady, the kind of, and the cool moment that he had at the end of after the Apple Cup, where it wins the game, keeps the perfect season intact. DeBoer puts him on scholarship. It was criminal he wasn't already on scholarship, given what he did for Washington last season. And I think it's kind of more or less like, hey, you know what? We're going to cover all 3 phases. We're going to get Will, the new guy. We're going to get the running back, the old guy. We're going to get the linebackers, the heart of the defense, and Grady. You can't forget Grady. I think I will guarantee you there's going to be a couple of kicks this season Grady has that we're not even thinking about right now. It's going to pay dividends down the road at the end of the season.
Yeah, and I know it's something you and I have both wrote about over on our respective websites, is Grady has continued to improve from distance, which, with all the questions that we've seen and we have about the offensive line, having a guy who can consistently hit from, let's just say 45 beyond, where 50 is just a different animal in the college game. But if he can consistently show that he can hit from, let's just say between 45 and 52, that's going to be a major factor for this team as a whole, where all of a sudden, some of these drives stall out, where we saw Washington having to go for it last year because whether they didn't want to rely on long field goals or, you have that offense and you might as well go for it every chance you get, that now you have a way to consistently put points on the board. And it was awesome that Grady also, was named the Lou Groza watch list. That's really cool. And just all that sort of stuff that comes with that, seeing what he can potentially grow into this season is a really, really exciting thought. And it's awesome to see him be recognized as a captain as well. And Lars, let's jump over to the recruiting side of things, where Jedd Fisch sent a not so subtle message to some wide receivers on the recruiting trail. Right after a message from our friends over at 5 Hour Energy, because 5 Hour Energy is awesome for so many different just daily activities. Like if you need to tackle a to-do list, 5 Hour Energy fixes tired fast, or they have a long list due for work or a list of DIY projects to tackle at home. Take a 5 Hour Energy shot so you can check everything off your list. If you're like me, you always have a large list of projects for the home. When you get your supplies for the project, do not forget the most essential supply, which is a 5 Hour Energy shot. 5 Hour Energy is the brand hardworking people like you have trusted for over 20 years to give them the alert, energized feeling they need to get through a busy, hectic. You always know right where to find 5 Hour Energy shots, right at the cash register at nearly every convenience, drug, and grocery store nationwide. Stock up on money-saving multi-packs to make sure you never run out of delicious, energizing 5 Hour Energy shots. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, that is the number 5hourenergy.com, and get some 5 Hour Energy product today, you can use our promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Go to 5hourenergy.com today. Lars, Jedd Fisch is, Washington has a really solid class of wide receivers already. But Jedd Fisch is certainly still trying to add to that, as we saw with Andrew Marsh, which I'm sure we'll get into a little bit. But he said something at the end of his press conference on Monday that was very interesting.
Yeah, it was really out of left field. The question that he was answering didn't necessarily lead up to it. I mean, I think it was talking about, the long-term future of Damon, something along that lines. But it was basically like Jedd said, I don't know why any wide receiver wouldn't want to play in this offense. He said that verbatim. And to me, I remember the only thought that came to my head was, well, that has to be for recruiting. Because to me, especially this time of year, like right before the season, there's nobody in that room who's thinking of transferring. So you're not talking about your own roster. You're talking about who wouldn't want to come play at Washington. And I think now it's almost going to be a perfect tie-in to where if we talk about Washington's offense exploding and Denzel having 300-yard games, and maybe you have another couple, dual 100-yard guys at receiver over the first 3 games of the season, now Jedd can say, look, again, I said it even before we played the first snap. I don't know why any receiver wouldn't want to play in this offense. And the only message that is true, aside from maybe when you clip it and talk about future transfer portal guys, is high school recruits. And we both know that Jedd knows how to use the media when he wants to send a message. And I'm not necessarily, because again, to be clear for fans, he can't specifically talk about any recruit, even if it's committed to Washington or not, until they sign, just to be clear. So he's pointing this out as a vague statement to say, look, if I'm a receiver and I have an offer from Washington, I don't know why I would not want to play in this offense that's tailor-made for a pro NFL receiver. The problem is recruits saw it at Arizona, but they haven't truly seen it, what it's going to look like at Washington. It's almost like Jedd's warning shots to recruits, saying, okay, if you don't want to commit to us, that's fine. But on October 5th, potentially, when a certain team comes to town and we, have a couple of 100-yard receivers and we happen to win that game, because again, Jedd's confident. That's exactly what Jedd's thinking. He's not going to say it, obviously, but he's going to walk right up to that line and say, look, watch. And then tell me no one more time with a straight face.
So let's just, pull the curtain back here. You're talking about Andrew Marsh, 4-star wide receiver who Washington was very, very hot on the trail on. And there was a lot of smoke on the day of his commitment that Washington was making a late push, with whatever resources they might have had available to them to try to get him to choose Washington over Michigan. And he still ends up going with the Wolverines. And, that's something that certainly needs to be monitored, where Donovan Olugbode also made some comments to somebody over at 247 saying that Washington's still in contact with him. Florida's still in contact with him, where it's clear. It's clear that those are the kind of players that Jedd wants to add to this class, where Phillip Bell is an uncommitted guy that's out there right now that Washington still seems to be making a push for, where they seem to be the dark horse in what seems to be a race between USC and Ohio State right now. And I love and I respect where he's going with all these comments, because that's what really makes this offense go, where we look at what it's going to be like this season, where, having a guy like Denzel is fantastic. Denzel Boston can be an elite receiver in this offense. You could say Jeremiah Hunter could as well. You can say that Giles Jackson could be a really, really nice piece in this offense. But going down the line, when you look at this 2025 class, you see a bunch of really, really good pieces, where Chris Lawson, just in terms of his play style and everything, he reminds me of a guy like DJ Moore, where I'm not saying that's who, I think he's going to be in terms of a ceiling, where it's unfair to give it a high schooler that sort of ceiling to live up to. But look at what the Chicago Bears did with DJ Moore. They went out and they drafted Rome Odunze, where they said, we really like having this guy. Now let's put that guy next to him. And that's exactly what it feels like Jedd wants to do, where we got a Chris Lawson, we got a Deji Ajose, we got a Desmond Roebuck. We have some guys in this class that we really, really like. But let's go get one more guy who can really take it over the top, a la Tyrone McMillan.
Exactly. And Raiden Vinesbat already in the class as well.
Yes, Raiden Vinesbat as well.
And when you look at all, I know you didn't leave him out initially. There was one name you didn't say. So just
yeah,
kind of crawling fans like, wait, what happened to Brady? No, he's still there. It's all good. But I think it actually hammers home the point of that's what you're going to get the cherry on top. That's why you fill out the entire class going into the season, so you're not trying to piecework and say, crap, we're still a couple wide receivers short. Now we got to go offer guys that are 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 on the list. No, we're going and saying, you know what? These are the guys we got. If we only sign these guys, we're good. We just need, we know, and Jedd knows, and Kevin Cummings knows, you can always use another elite receiver. And if you look at all these guys they're targeting, they're top 100 guys, or at least top 150 guys. And it's why Missouri wanted Donovan Olugbode. It's why everybody wanted Andrew Marsh. Why everybody wants Phillip Bell. Those are the guys that you have to go and get, because when you look at the roster, we like Audric Harris. We like Rashid Williams. We like Keith Reynolds. We like, again, when healthy, Kevin Green Jr., what we got to see in fall camp. But you don't have that big body, that go-to guy, the guy that you can just put out on the X and say, you know what, guaranteed. Audric might become that guy. Rashid might become that guy. But either way, this is why you don't stop at saying, we're good with what we got. We always want to be chasing, is all I'm trying to say.
No, you're absolutely right there. There's one name where I'm sure it's somebody that the everydayers are really curious about, and that's Justice Williams, where we haven't seen him practice just yet. It looks like he's missed the majority of fall camp with an injury, so that's a situation to monitor, where that's a guy, if he's healthy, who could be that big true outside guy. But your point is valid either way, where the more you look at this, the more it's if somebody like Donovan Olugbode or Andrew Marsh, has a change of heart and wants to join this class, that's what it's about. Where, when we compare things to Arizona and to Tyrone McMillan, that's exactly what happened there. They kept pushing, and they got a signature. And at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. And all the other schools are trying the same thing. And it's always felt like it hasn't necessarily been a huge Washington thing to try to flip guys. And we've said on this program before, we're not saying rely on a flip, rely on one of these guys eventually, flipping from wherever to Washington, where that's never going to be a solid strategy. That will never pay off. But with the majority of the class filled out, with where it is now, that's all you're looking for at most of these positions, is a cherry on top. Just that guy who you can say, yeah, this is really good. Now let's make it elite.
Exactly. That's why, when we started to look at some of the takes that they were having, it's like, but you're taking him over him. Oh no, you're actually stacking bodies. You're talking 18, 24 months out, because some of the takes, it's like, really, they're taking, and this is notice, because I'm not going to name players. When you just look at certain takes, you're thinking, how does it add up? And now as we go along, and Washington's still trying for some of these guys, it's, oh no, good. They already assigned kind of some of these roles of what these guys were envisioning to do. And you can kind of see, we've only gotten to see fall camp, but from what we've seen at the receiver position, you can kind of see the body types and the positions align where Audric can play probably two different. You got the slot guys that can ideally play one, but maybe a second if you need to in a pinch. And then you have the two outside guys. So there's so many different things that you can do with that room. And it's one thing Jedd said, Arizona, it's one thing any great offensive coach will always tell you. If you can go get an elite receiver and nothing is truly stopping you until they say no, you go and get that guy. Like that's it would be almost a cause for concern if Jedd's still not trying and saying, you know what, we're good with what we got right now. And again, the other side of this is time. We haven't seen Washington play. Once some of these games start to get played, then you're going to see recruits maybe start to make an unofficial visit back to Washington and say, you know what, let me think about this one more time. Let me see what that atmosphere is like on a game setting. What are the traditions that Fisch hinted at doing that recruits might want to see, and you kind of immerse yourself in the Washington culture. So all you can do if you're Washington is put yourself in position to get those guys or try and get those guys on a second chance. And that's exactly where they're at right now. And so I think it's a perfect position for Washington because you're set right now and you're in a good position. You can only get better from here on out.
Right. Lars, I really love where you're going with all that. It's time for us to get out of here for the day. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all the everydayers tuning in. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Huskies your first listen of the day. Now go check out the Locked On College Football podcast from NIL deals, never-ending conference realignment rumors. Our guy Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron. You can find the link to Locked On College Football in the description, so you don't need to search. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And make sure you go check out our Locked On Huskies Insider program as well, and the link to that is also down in the description below, where you get a 2-week free trial, and after that it's $4.99. We're dropping all sorts of recruiting rumors, game analysis, practice stuff that we might be hearing. Anything that we're hearing, we're dropping with our insiders first. Some of that we might not even get a chance to mention on the show, so you want to make sure you go join that. Again, you get a free 2-week trial, and after that it's just $4.99 a month. You also get access to exclusive Q&As, the ability to chat with us one-on-one, our Google Drive where we're sharing a bunch of the interviews that we've done from spring and fall camp over there. We're going to find some more stuff that we can throw on there during the season. And it's just going to be a fun time. We want to make sure it's very, very well worth that. And with that being said, we got so much fun stuff coming at you through the rest of the season because it is game week. We're so excited to be back. With that being said, make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcast. So that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So make sure you click that subscribe button, click that like button, and that little bell so you never miss when we post new video. Any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please, if it's a 5-star review. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Thursday.